have Eric Wing with me today, so it should be very informative. It always is when Eric joins us. What we'll be talking about today is importing Civil 3D topo surfaces and site information into Revit. And he has a real treat for you today because he actually is starting a project that he'll be showing you how he gets started. So it's perfect timing. Perfect timing.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so we do expect quite a large number today. We had over 300 people registered, so I'm going to give everyone a few more minutes to get logged in. And while they're doing that, if you would, please go ahead and tell me where you are logging in from. So I see David is coming in from Philadelphia. Welcome, David. Glad to have you on. If you'll type in the question panel where you're logging in from, that will be helpful. I must not be seeing everyone's. Hold on, let me see if I can see. Oh, there we go. Now it's starting to show up. There we go. All right, so Juliet from Manhattan Beach, California, welcome. Tenzin from Toronto, excellent. And I apologize if I say this name wrong. Inam from Pakistan, welcome, glad to have you on. Gary from Calgary, Alberta. Holly from Philly. Trey coming in from Roanoke, Virginia, welcome. Sean from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Mike is coming in from St. Louis, Missouri. And Nathan coming in from Dartmouth. Yep. Dartmouth. That's right. All right. Well, welcome everyone. We're excited to have you. Again, we do still have some people logging in, so I'm going to give them a few more minutes. And as we wait, if you just logged in, go ahead and let us know where you're coming in from. I love when we have a truly global audience. It's exciting for me to see all of you. It really is. And I love the fact that we can connect this way without having to travel and spread the coronavirus or any other viruses around. Oh, Mark from Centennial, Colorado. Excellent. Glad to have you on. How are we looking? We've got a couple more minutes. We'll let everyone log in. Christopher coming in from Jefferson, New York, or Port Jefferson, New York. Eric, where are you in New York?
I'm in Syracuse, New York.
Syracuse, okay.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, I think the numbers are starting to steady off, so why don't we go ahead and get started. Just to let you know, the lines are muted just to reduce background noise because we are recording this. However, if you have questions, definitely ask those questions in the question panel. Excuse me, I'm trying not to cough in your ears. But since we are muted, again, go ahead and type your questions in the question panel. We do want this to be as interactive as possible. So if you would like to ask your question live, go ahead and raise your hand in the attendee panel so that I can open up your line when we get to that point. And the recording to the session will be sent out after it is over. So definitely be watching for that. It's always helpful to go back and watch things. The nice thing is Eric is actually showing us some content from one of the courses he created, and actually he is in the process of updating because there has been some new functionality added to the programs. And so we wanted to make sure we shared that information with you. So I'm so glad that you're here. Just for those of you that have never joined our meetups before, this is supposed to be interactive. We do encourage you to ask your questions. When you want to ask one live, I will open the phone line up so that you can ask that. So if you would, when you ask a question in the question answer panel, you can put a note in there that you want to ask it live, or you can just raise your hand, like I said, in the attendees panel. This is a great place, though, for everyone to join together and communicate as a community and be able to ask the experts like Eric questions on things that you're working on. So hopefully you had a chance to know what the topic was for today. And I think we have some great information. But if there are other meetups you're interested, you can see we have a number of meetups available that you can jump into. Everything from electrical engineer from the manufacturing side, plant designer, mechanical engineer, architect, BIM manager, and civil engineer. And then brand new this week, on Thursday this week, we'll be holding our first building engineer meetup. This week, we'll be talking specifically about the electrical side of building engineering, but we will be rotating through mechanical topics and structural topics as well. So hopefully we'll see you on that. So with no further ado, let's introduce Eric Wing. So Eric has presented to us before. He has created several topics, several courses in our connected learning experience. In fact, today's topic is one of the courses from that. And so Eric, tell us a little bit about you and CS Companies.
Thanks, Michelle. So I'm Eric Wing. I'm the Director of Building Information Modeling for CNF Companies. We're headquartered here in Syracuse, which is actually the smallest city that we're in. So we have about 25 offices across the country. We standardized on BIM when I got here around 2007. I personally have been using Revit and BIM for, I guess now it's 2020, so I guess now 20 years. I can do the simple math when I started doing this, and that's kind of how I got into the BIM field. I never meant to be the BIM guy, but when I started in the field, people were still hand drafting, so I went on a campaign to get everyone over to AutoCAD, and it kind of stuck. So that kind of has been my gig ever since. Maybe I'm more of a politician than I am a technical person, but that's me pretty much in a nutshell.
Excellent, excellent. So for those of you that like to go and take the courses that we talk about in these meetups, I will go ahead and put the link in the chat panel for you. But this is the course. It's reducing rework by importing the TOPO surfaces and site information from Civil 3D into Revit. It should take about 25 minutes. The great thing is there's a data set that you can actually try it. It won't be the same data set that Eric will be showing today because, like I'd said, he's going to be showing us a project that he's starting today for CNS Companies. So very excited for that. So to no further ado, Eric, I'm going to turn the time over to you and just let me know when you're ready to have me pass the controls so you can share your screen.
Great. Yeah, let's go through a couple of these points and I'll have you pass it over. So
Okay.
What I'd like to do is go through these steps. So the most important part, obviously, is to get our Revit model geolocated. With Revit 2019 and up, they've had some advancements in terms of pulling in state plane information into Revit to really be able to verify that you're in the right spot. You know, once we're able to pull that information in, it's a little less stressful. To be honest, this is probably the most stressful part of my job is making sure models are lined up and coordinated. Then, you know, we'll just go through the clicks of Revit to get the stuff in. And one great thing that they've developed is is to be able to bring in the surface into Revit using BIM 360. It started off a little slow, but boy, I'll tell you, I really like this feature, and you'll be able to see how we can export that tin surface, and it will come into Revit with all of our different surfaces. That way we can start doing our grading and that kind of stuff, or we can let the civil engineer do all the grading, and we're going to be able to update that model in real time. That's a huge thing that we've been lacking in the industry is coordination between site and civil. Now, sorry about my phone ringing. I'll just hang it up. Hope it wasn't one of you guys calling in. I appreciate it. I'm sorry about that. And yeah, so link of BIM 360 topo in the Revit. That's a typo there. BIM. Sorry about that. That's my fault. If I misspelled BIM, that's going to be a problem, right? And I do want to look at a BIM execution plan, and then just take a look at BIM 360 account settings. So, Michelle, if you could hand me the rights to present.
You bet. Give me 1 second.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, you should have presenter rights now.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see that.
Can you see my Revit window?
Yes, that's what we're looking at, Revit.
You're looking at Revit. You can see it moving around?
Yep.
Perfect, good, because I can't see it. Okay, so what I want to do, like Michelle mentioned, and I'm going to use this as a disclaimer, I'm out on a limb a little bit because I'm really setting this up today, and I just got the Civil 3D model, and it's going through iterations of being cleaned up. So I'm actually going to bring in not a clean model, but this is kind of good because I want to show you what to look for, the good and the bad, and the reason I do this the way I do it. So I'm just going to start with just a brand new model I started from scratch. Of course, I implore you to use your templates. This is the default that comes with the software. But again, I want to point out too that I'm using 2020.2, and that's a big difference. And also on the Civil 3D side, because that's what's carrying the BIM 360 link. That's what makes it work better. So if you're using 2020.1, you're gonna want to find the 2020.2 download and patch your software, both on the Civil 3D side as well as the Revit side. So what I'll do is I'll quickly I'm in a site plan right now. So I want to set this up to bring in a topo, because usually when you do it, you don't know where it is, right? I know this is pretty high, and my Revit settings are just set for architectural. So essentially in my properties, I'll set my orientation to true north. And of course, this is great in Revit where you can have a plan true north, and then our project north is going to be oriented the way we would want to design something, linear. So if I scroll down a little bit, I just want to tweak my my view range. So I want my top to be unlimited. Let's see, as high as humanly possible. My cut plane, I think I'm around 1,500. I know Michelle's out in Utah. She's used to the higher planes. So my bottom, I'm going to go unlimited. My view depth, I'll also go unlimited, right? Just so I can see everything. And I'm going to hit apply, then okay. So now I want to jump into Civil 3D, and we'll see that we've got, nothing spectacular here, a pretty common plan. But when I hover over this, we'll see that this is a tin surface, right? So historically, we can't bring this into Revit. So, but what I want to do, and what's important in Revit, is we want to make sure that this survey, or at least this AutoCAD file, is on state plane. So if we go to our tool space into settings, we can just right click on the root file and go to edit drawing settings. And I just like to make sure that we're on that state plane, because when we bring this into Revit, it's not gonna read it. Our numbers are still gonna be right, but it's good to have them both on that state plane. That way we can confirm that we've got the right data. Trust me, when you get the phone call saying your building's not lined up with your site, you nervously pick through the model and every little bit of information I can find to support the fact that my building's in the right spot. Trust me, I look for. So essentially what you want to do, and again, we're in the middle of a project, so I still have to work on this, but generally you want to W block information out, right? W, enter. We W block stuff out. It doesn't really matter where your pick point is. I like to keep it at 0, 0 if I can, if it's not causing issues. The problem is if that tin surface is over 20 miles away from 0, 0, you're going to have an issue. And I think that's the issue I'm having with this, but I'm going to work through it so you can see it. I already had one W block, so, you know, you would just select the objects you want here. My insert units, C, right? Because anytime you bring in something from the architect, it's right. So that's another issue when we're pulling models back and forth, right? Because when we export our Revit model, we want that to drop right into your site at the right scale, right? So when we export that, I'm just going to hit cancel here. So I would W block this little portion. Right? Now, if I jump back into Revit, right, I'm going to go to Insert. Now I'm going to link CAD. It has to be a link. And this is what I W blocked out. And generally, I'll have a few other models just to make sure stuff is in the right spot. I don't release this stuff until I am 100% sure myself that everything's in the right spot. And we'll talk about BIM 360. Coincidentally, we cannot publish coordinates to other models in BIM 360. So this stuff has to be set up before you push it out there, right? So I'm going to grab my site and import units feet. Positioning, we don't have anything set up, so I'm just going to go good old-fashioned center to center. Place at level 1, and we can orient it to view. I know that my view is oriented to true north, so that's not going to really make a big difference. So now if I open it, and I'm still getting this, so I have more cleanup to do. This is a bad thing. You don't want this, okay? But what I like to do is this will be a site model. Okay, I'm not pulling this into my architectural model. I'm not pulling it into my trade models, right? So worst case scenario, I've got a site model that's quarantined. So it's not propagating any bad data into the trade models, right? So worst case scenario, if this dialogue still keeps coming up, it's not going to affect the rest of my project, okay? I won't let that stay like that, but just so you know, that's I like to quarantine it in that manner, right? Some elements were lost, we know that, okay? So, and again, I got the dialogue that said the geometry is way off, right? And it's not much here, right? The tin surface, I'm only getting some basic stuff. But now if I go to manage and if I go to my location, we'll see here that it's the default's Boston, right? That's where Revit came from, so that's what they're going to default to. If I close out of my default location, right now, if I click my coordinates drop down and if I acquire the coordinates, I grab that. Now, if I go back to my location, we're going to see now we're on that GIS coordinate system, right? So I know that Revit is in the right spot. And the good thing is my project base point, my survey point are right on top of my internal Revit project point. And that's the issue you'll get, right? If your model's 20 miles away from that, you're going to have an issue. So now we know that we're right in the middle of our model, right? So if I hit OK here, now if I want to insert link CAD, and I'll grab like a 2D model, but this time my positioning wants to be shared coordinates. We click OK here. Yeah, I know. I don't like that. It just bothers me. Usually I'll clean this stuff up, but I promised I wouldn't do that. Take a second. Some elements are lost. We know that's unfortunate, but that happens. Close out of here. Okay, now we're getting stuff in there. Stuff's coming into the right spot. Perfect, right? So if we hover over these items, we'll see it says insert location is default location. That's imperative. When we do export our TOPO to BIM 360, it doesn't give us an origin to origin or a shared coordinate. Either it's in the right spot or it's not, right? So if you're using that tool, you do have to be on shared coordinates. So what I want to do at this point is generally I like to have an actual benchmark location, and this I didn't get one yet. So I do like to move my points over to the correct spot, or just to a spot for now. So now if I select my hover in and tab onto my survey point, you'll see my northern easting is, well, we're going to verify that that's correct. I'm just not going to take its word for it. But it's not going to give you an elevation, right? It doesn't really know what that elevation is. So if I unclip this, right, and I'm just going to move this up to, I chose the top of this kind of wall here. And I am moving a little slow, probably because of the go-to meeting that we're on. So if I, I guess I panned out a little too far there. Uh-oh. Can
I've
you
just
see
stopped
my
sharing my screen, my video, so it hopefully will help your speed up.
Oh, okay. I'll just snap to the end point of that wall there. Now what I want to do, if I jump into Civil 3D, I know that I'm snapping here. So I've got 1426.01. We can change these points at any point. So I want to change my elevation to 1426.01 and hit enter. I'm going to clip that back down. Now, I do want to move my project base point in my site model to that, and you'll see why when I bring in an architectural model, I'm going to want that to bring it in project base point to project base point. It just kind of makes it easier. But what you should see here, if I select my project base point, notice that it no longer has the clip. It doesn't have the paperclip icon anymore. They removed that in point 2. So that's another feature that they got rid of. So if I click on move, it's basically essentially unclipped. I'm going to pan over a little slower this time. And I'm going to zoom in and make sure that I am in the right spot. The endpoint there. And I'm going to change it to the same elevation, 1426.01. 1426.01. Now, if we bring in the architectural model into here, hit escape a couple times, of course, go back to insert, link Revit, and I'm going to grab that architectural model, but notice my positioning. This is a new positioning point 2 that was added in 2019, which I like just for this case alone. Project base point to project base point, which means it's at least going to be at the elevation that I specified. It'll be closer to where I need to move it, right? So project base point to project base point, I'm going to open that up. And it might take a little longer, but we'll wait for it. I have 2 items that are linked into it, but that's okay, because you won't know it in the architectural model. You're going to publish those coordinates when you get over to the architectural model. So I'll just click close here. And now, this is another coordination meeting that we haven't had yet. So you might cringe when you see me do this. It's okay. Right? I'm going to align my model to that site, right? So if I take AL for align, I'm going to pick this magenta line, and I'll pick a point along my architectural model. And I'm going to pick here and here, right? Now, at this point, we would publish those coordinates to the architectural model. Okay. So now that we've got that positioned, right, we can jump into Civil 3D. So if we want topographical information, this is where Civil 3D comes in. So if we go over to Civil 3D now, what we need to do is we need to publish this to, let me just move my little window here. We're going to click on, we're going to go to the output panel, or I'm sorry, the output tab, and on the publish panel, we'll click on publish surfaces, right? And again, I've already published this model. Let me click it again. There we go. Now this is what's cool. So all the surfaces in here, all those tin surfaces can be exported. I'm not sure which one to export. So I'm gonna keep them all selected. I'm not gonna actually hit the export now because it does take a while, and it does take a while to register on BIM 360. Takes about 15, 20 minutes on average, I have found. So I'm just going to click cancel. And luckily, this is not a tie-in that you used to have. This just comes with now the 2020.2 upgrade. So you don't have to go find the BIM 360 exporters and load them. You have the publish built into the actual software. So I'm going to hit cancel. And this is just the one part that makes me a little nervous when I bring this in. I know this is going to take a minute. So what I want to do is now, notice that on the Insert tab, we can link topography. Okay. Now to do this, you have to be on BIM 360 in order to, you have to have a subscription to it, and we'll look at that in a moment. But if I click on link topography, okay, this is, it takes a couple minutes. So Michelle, I don't know if you wanted to, if anyone has any questions up to this point, you can either type them in or ask them, or I know this is going to take a minute. I couldn't really avoid this, so go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't see any questions coming in, but if you do have a question, raise your hand in the participants panel or type that into the question panel, and I can open up your line if you'd like. And I don't see anyone's hands raising so far.
Okay.
You're just doing that good. There's no questions.
or everyone logged off. We'll see. I try to be concise, but sometimes I'm not. So it's something I've been working on. And generally, I mean, just because we're bogging down here, I mean, basically we're on the go-to meeting, and a lot of times that will slow this process down. But it still can be a little bit slow. It takes a little patience. So once the model's in and it's cached, basically it's a lot easier to update it, because if you're bringing it in cold for the first time, it's gotta cache all that data. So I think while we're waiting for it, maybe I can jump over, because once we bring this in, we'll just go back through a couple other things. But what I thought I would show would be a BIM execution plan that I wrote specifically just for this. So if everyone can see this, so basically,
can you make it a little bigger? Sorry. If you maybe scroll in a little bit or something.
I will go 200%. Aha.
That looks better. Yes. Yeah, much more readable. Thank you.
Okay. So essentially, this is a 1.5-page document. To be completely honest, I'd rather have a 1.5-page document that actually tells you exactly what the expectations are for a project than a 250-page document that just kind of skims through everything. You're not sure what you need to submit after you've read it. So on this, we are doing, actually, it's an island that we have around 60, 70 buildings on it. So I wrote this BIM implementation plan just for that portion of it. So basically what we'll see is, AutoCAD, Civil 3D, state plane coordinates like I had mentioned. But now this gets into what I was talking about in terms of the Revit civil model. You want to have a separate site civil Revit model is what I found. And a lot of this is subjective, and I understand that there's multiple ways to do this. However, this is what I have found to be the safest, because if you get those big coordinates, it will really cause a lot of latency and artifacting in your Revit models, and that's not something we want. So I have a site civil coordination Revit model. That way, if you want to bring in, semi trucks and people and cars, go ahead, bring all that stuff into your civil model. Just don't bring it into your working models, your architectural models, or your trade models. I have just found that that's important. And it just goes down through click by click, kind of what we do. But in terms of the trade models, you start your architectural model like you generally would. You can link in your trade models like you generally would. Once you publish the coordinates to your architectural model, like when you saw me move it, if you close out of that and go back to your architectural model, you won't notice that anything's really happened, other than when you go to the the site, you'll see that it's on the state plane. Then you publish those coordinates to the mechanical model, or vice versa. If you're in a mechanical model, electrical model, or trade model, you can just acquire those coordinates from the architectural model, and everything's going to stay right where it is, right? So now when I go back to my meeting and I realize that my architectural model isn't quite aligned, I can move that around and I can still publish those coordinates, and that'll propagate through the project, which is fine because we're on the coordinate system. The only problem is when I get down to the bottom, it makes me nervous. Shared coordinates always do make me nervous because any projects that I've had where models aren't aligned, it's because of shared coordinates, right? So I really test it out very nervously and I take my time. But that brings us to BIM 360. You have to do this before you put your project up on BIM 360. You can acquire coordinates, but you cannot publish coordinates on BIM 360. You will not be able to sync your model because it can't update the other model. They haven't updated that yet. I don't know if that's planned or not. I'm just an end user. So it'd be nice, but just so you know that the project has to be up on BIM 360 before you start doing this stuff. So hopefully in Revit. Okay, so back in Revit. Now what we'll see is we have some. So this is just in one of my projects. So if I grab my that Civil 3D model that I exported, and if I link that in, this might take a little while too. So I do like to lead off with that BIM execution plan. So okay, so now it's going to bring in my TOPO, which is good. One thing I do like to do, if I go down to my south elevation, we'll see that we have a lot down here, and my site levels are still minus that increment, right? So I don't even need level 2. I'll just delete it. I'll hit OK. Now, if I just select this level, I'm going to just move my level up. I'm not relocating the project. I'm simply moving my level up, and that was 1426.01. Right? Because now when I go to a 3D view, right? Here's our stuff, and here's our roadways and all of that. So, like if I change my view to something to where we can see what we're looking at here, it's coordinated now with that site, right? But what's going to happen is it brings in just what's awesome is if I hover and tab and select that, look, it's a topo. I like that, right? So it's got our projected area, surface area. We can do what we want to do with it. You can model in roadways, whatever you do. But in mind, though, that we're finally live with the civil engineers. So if they change stuff in their TIM surface, it's going to update this surface. And because it's linked, it's going to find it, right? So if we go down to Revit links and right click and go to manage links, we're going to see now we have typography, and we're going to see that's pulling from BIM 360. Right, that's why we're doing this, so we can have true coordination. So if I hit cancel here, so that brings it in. If we want to view more, if we go into typography, it will bring in the triangulated surfaces and all that. So we're actually truly collaborating with the civil engineer, and since it's in the right place in space. We're confident that we can have the discussion. Hey, where is this building outline? I'm not sure. I think I got it right, but I need someone else to tell me that. I'll move my building wherever you want. Or, hey, you go into my Revit model and move the building. How does that sound? I'd rather pin it on someone else, literally. So that's really what I wanted to show you in Revit.
So we do have a question coming in from James. He's saying, sorry, I missed it. Did you create the topo mesh from the CAD link and then lowered it? Or was the CAD brought in at the correct elevation?
The CAD was brought in at the correct elevation. The only problem is if I go back to my south elevation, what happens is it's CAD world, right? So anything that's at 0 came in at my 0 feet, 0 inches, right? So the 2D CAD work is what came in at 0 feet. My 3D stuff came in at the right elevation, just like it is in Civil 3D, just like it is in AutoCAD. The only problem is, and really the only reason I moved my level up was just so I could have my levels there. But if I brought in another model on shared coordinates, it's going to be at the right elevation. I just like to coordinate that with my levels, right? So if I select level 1 here, if I can get to it, right now I can edit that type, and I can pull that datum elevation from my survey point, right? So now I'm getting the real. I should have this in decimals. I apologize for my architectural units, but I just moved that up so I can see that I'm at the actual correct survey point elevation. Hopefully that answered your question. But we just have to deal with the fact that we have a lot of stuff at 0 still, because that's just the nature of AutoCAD, right? It's the tin surface is 3D, but all these roadways and stuff are not. So I wanted to move those up just so I could see them at my elevation. Hopefully that answered your question.
James, would you like me to answer or open up your line, and you can maybe let us know if he did in fact answer the question completely? See if I can find you in here. There you are. Okay, James, your line is now open. Are you able to speak with us? Oh, just on a mic. Okay. Yep. So he has no mic, so he won't be able to answer that. But hopefully he does have a follow-up question. Mm-hmm. Give him 1 second to finish typing that, I guess.
Sure.
But he does say that you did answer the question he asked, yes.
Oh, good.
If anyone else has questions, definitely type those in. James is saying, is it better to change the survey point first, then import the CAD?
It's a good question. I've done it both ways. Yeah, there's been times where, yeah, if you move the survey point, you won't have to do what I just did, or you could just relocate the project and it will come in correctly. You can do it either way. It's more of a process than anything else. But yeah, if you know that information, you can change your points. I usually like to acquire the coordinates to get my northern easting. I just kind of like to do that first for no real good reason other than superstition. But yeah, you could move your project base point and your survey point around at any point before you bring in that topo. Or a lot of times people won't move the northern easting at all. The only thing they're gonna move is that elevation. And that works too. You can be on shared coordinates but not be geolocated. And I do see that a lot too. I'd rather not do that, but you can do either in whatever order.
Okay, James says thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking.
So if you do have more questions, definitely type those in or raise your hand and I can open it up your line. Okay, so James is saying, I noticed that you brought all this in, not with Project True North. Does switching it now affect anything you just imported?
It won't, because of the fact that, so the site I did, when I was in my site, I aligned my site, the orientation to True North. But because of the fact that this is specifically a site model, it doesn't matter, because what's going to happen is, since we rotated the architectural model into position, that architectural model is what we really wanted to define True North and Project North, right? So when we publish the coordinates back to our architectural model, right? And we go to our site model and our architectural model, that will be rotated to true north, but yet our sheet models or our sheet views that we're working on are going to be rotated to project north, just however we started that model in a linear manner, if that answers your question.
Great. And Claire is asking the question, if we are working with Revit 2019, what are the major differences that we should understand while doing this process?
The only real differences are with your project base point. You have to make sure that you have it unclipped. You're going to move the project. You're going to move your links. In terms of the BIM 360 functionality, you're going to have link topography, but it's a little harder. Sometimes it's off a bit. This is pinned down a little better, but it's 1 in 10, right? I saw it bad on one project, so that's just me jumping to conclusions because I'm a very pessimistic type. So if I see something bad happen once, I tend to dismiss it as not useful. But it's pretty, that whole side of it's pretty much the same functionality. It's on the Civil 3D side that really makes a difference, right? If you got the 20.2, that's the big difference in terms of publishing surfaces and in terms of not having to have the BIM 360 tab and all of that. On the Revit side, it's not bad. I would just check it carefully. Just like any project on shared coordinates, I don't trust, so I always check them. But with 2020, it's a little more streamlined, and I didn't prove it to you here, but it is faster. It definitely is faster.
Great. And Beth is asking the question, how long did it take you to get comfortable with this workflow? Basically, how much background do you have with Civil 3D?
I'm still not comfortable with it. The whole thing makes me nervous. This project makes me nervous. I don't know Civil 3D much at all, right? I know enough to know what I need to pull into Revit, right? So when I come into here, I'm going through this. I'm looking at the drawings, right? I'm looking at my datum. I know that I'm going to be able to pull in the state plane coordinate just because I figured out how to find it. But I used to be good at AutoCAD. I am not a civil engineer, and I just know there's always been an incompatibility, and I just kind of figured out how to bring the two together, right? So on this one, we're going to have a meeting because where I moved that project base point, I want to move it to one of these 3 points, right? But I don't want to just move it. I want to see that point, and I can see one of them, the one I wanted to move it to, but I don't like the fact that it says it's on that light pole, but it's over here. So I'm not gonna start my project with something that I'm not 100% sure of. So I really avoided that question, didn't I? I'm uncomfortable to the point where I nervously check everything I do constantly. And I think once I become more comfortable with it, that's probably when I'll have a project that's not lining up. I think if I can answer it. Hopefully I somehow answered your question. It took me a while to come up with this specific workflow, though, to make sure that I have a site civil model and it's not corrupting my entire project. That to me was kind of a mental breakthrough for me, just because of the fact that I'm bringing the stuff in. I got to worry about it being lined up. Now I got to worry about having all this called CAD shrapnel screwing up my Revit models when all I want to do is line my stupid buildings up. So I found that if I quarantine a site model, if there's any latency or any artifacting going on, it's only going to be in that model. And again, if people want to bring in, tractor trailers and stuff into their site model, go ahead. Now I have a model that I'm not going to open unless it's deemed that the buildings are off. And the BIM 360 part, I just learned that the hard way around a project on shared coordinates, and coordinates moved, and guess what? All of our models had to come off of BIM 360. So that was and it doesn't happen, when you're starting the project. If that occurs, it happens the day the project's going out, right? Most of my lessons I've learned have been the hard way. I hope I answered your question. That was kind of a...
Yeah, Beth is actually saying thank you. It makes her feel much better. Yeah, and
Good.
Claire is saying
Okay,
thank you
good.
as well.
Oh yeah, it stresses me out. This is the one thing that stresses me out the most, because this is one thing I've seen fail: shared coordinates. And if I have a normal project, I don't put them on shared coordinates unless we really have to coordinate with the civil engineer. Then I'm going to put them on shared coordinates.
Great.
And I make sure that in my BIM execution plan, okay, we're going shared coordinates. Here's all this stuff you need to give us. Give us this specifically. Then I'll do it. If you don't have any of this, sorry, I'm not comfortable doing it.
Yeah, that communication is key, isn't it, to any success?
It really is.
Excellent. Well, if you have additional questions for Eric, definitely write those into the question panel or raise your hand and I can open up your line. All right. And so for those of you, like I said, those that want to take the course that this is connected to, the older courses up there, I did provide a link to that in the chat panel. And Eric is actually in the process of updating it with this BIM 360 link as well, so that you'll have that to go off of in the future. Oh, it looks like James has a question. Does the process change if the site is brought into the architectural model instead of a separate model? Or is it a better practice to maintain the site as an independent model? I have found that often to better understand the elevations, you want to see the site model in context.
Oh, that's fine. You can bring it into the architectural model, and that's always how I've done it. But I just got into trouble having all that extra CAD data in my working model. But there's no reason that now that you're on shared coordinates, you can drop. So I really will dumb down my CAD file at that point, right? And then bring that into the architecture model. You're going to be able to drop it in on shared coordinates now, right? When you export your model to CAD, you're going to export it using shared coordinates. You can drop that into the architectural model. So sure, yeah, I'm sorry, you can export that into the site model. But yeah, I'll have a version of this definitely in that architectural model. You know, we'll bring in the topo, we'll bring in those types of, we'll bring in all those elements. Just, I'm going to, have a view template so that way I know that it's going to be turned off in every view except for the views I want to see it in. Right? We cut a section, we can see it. Yeah, it's important to have that in the architectural model. I found that I get into less trouble. Like a project like this size, this isn't, it's a bus maintenance facility. This is not one of the big projects I worry about. And I wouldn't mind just not even having a site model on this project. But the projects that we're going to have multiple trades, we're going to have multiple people in each model, and you want to rethink how much stuff you're bringing into that native architectural model, right? Because you're going to have all the trades linked, because you have to have the drawing sheets. You start to have a lot of data in that model that maybe doesn't have to be there. Instead of, overusing work sets to the point where no one understands them, just have a model you can turn on or off. Link in the site model. And it's the same, cut a section, you're getting the same data. It's only, you don't have to have it physically sitting in your model.
Right. And Joe is asking the question, are there any roads, sidewalks from civil CAD files brought in as subregions in your topography automatically, or how do you get that info into the civil view or into the 3D view to appear correctly and not triangulate or jagged?
Right, it's terrible, right? So if I let's go down to TOPO here. The more you do, I want to turn that on. I just want to turn off my triangulation. So what happens is the more you do, like if I turn off that stuff, that jaggedness, we'll see that, like if I hover and tab onto that surface, right, this is actual topography and that name, the EG, it brought all that in, because look, it's missing this part of it. So it does bring in these separate, that's the whole thing. So it does bring in the separate actual different tin surfaces, right? Because that's building site 1. So the more work you do in Civil 3D, because none of these roadways have been dealt with, if they had made a separate surface for those roadways, yeah, it's going to come right in. A lot of work my company does. We do a lot of overall campus projects where we're bringing in these surfaces, and that is one thing that I will go into Civil 3D, and you can edit the tin surface. You can break it down into as many surfaces, as you need. And I'm at the very edge of my Civil 3D knowledge. But the more work you do here, the less work you have to do over in Revit. And since you're coordinating it, a lot of time, many times our landscape architects will be working with the civil engineer in the Civil 3D model, right? Adding those subregions and stuff. So we don't have to keep adding subregions in Revit, because now that we're coordinated with the civil, any work we do on the Revit side is not going back to that civil model. It's going to get overwritten, right? So once you're coordinated, it wants to come from that Civil 3D side of it. Unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, Jill says thank you. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. All right, so we have about 5 more minutes. If you have any other questions, definitely type those in or raise your hand and I can open up your line. And Eric, I appreciate you coming on with us today. I think everything that you've shown has been very, very informative. I love the fact that you bring this real world project into the conversation so that people can see exactly where you start. I think that's very valuable.
Excellent. No, I'm glad you continue to have me rambling on.
Of course. Basam is asking, Eric, I always recommend to users to not move the BP or SP manually. Let Revit do it for you via acquired and publish. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it's not going to really move it, right? So theoretically, you don't have to move it. Theoretically, you don't have to move it. For coordination, I like to have my survey point at a benchmark location with the correct elevation. That way, if I am doing an overall campus and I have multiple buildings on a site, I know what those elevations are, because those elevations are being shot from that survey point. So I like to be as close to the civil process as I can be, because acquiring and publishing isn't going to physically move them. It's going to put them at the correct northern easting, but it doesn't know that northern easting it's just going to be out in the middle of the field somewhere. I'm more comfortable unclipping and moving those to a known location. Again, it's not of detriment to the actual model. They're still going to drop in the same spot. But in terms of also overall layout, because many times we are just the structural engineer of record. So when we are doing our site layout, we actually will physically dimension from that survey point or a project base point. We'll pull our dimensions from those points, because that's how they're laying out. That's how they're staking out their site. So I like to follow those points. If you're not doing that kind of measurement or that kind of layout, you don't have to move the stuff around, right? And I think that's why they removed the paperclip icon from the project base point, because it used to be when you move that with that clip, you physically are relocating the project. You're not doing that now. It's just moving it based on the northern easting on the state plane coordinates. So again, there's multiple ways to do it. I'm more comfortable having those in known locations.
Okay, and Juliet is asking, is there a way to convert the elevations so that your finished floor datum point can be 0, 0, and all other elevations up to date, up to that? And she's specifically talking about the survey elevations.
Yeah. So all you need to do is just have because all I did there, like if we look at our building here, that's still at 13. We look at our, I can find it. Oh, it's over here. This is at 1426. So all I do is so to get this, I had to click edit type, right? I would just duplicate this and call it C level or something, right? And then I change that elevation base to survey point. Hopefully that's what you meant. That way I can have a level at survey point, and then the rest are 13 feet like normal units. That way this doesn't drive the rest of the elevations, and that's literally why you saw me delete level 2, right? Because that was in my template. I just wanted it out of there because I only want this one elevation. Hopefully that's what you meant.
Juliet, I can possibly open up your line. Let's see if you're able to talk to us. Just see if that answers it. And your line is now open. Are you able to speak with us, Juliet? Sounds like maybe not. Okay. Okay. So let's go on to the next question. So Lionel says, we usually move the link so that the one point is at PBP /SP, especially since CAD is just centered anyway, instead of moving points.
I'm not sure I caught that.
Okay. So I'll repeat it. So Lionel is saying we usually move the link so that the known point is at PBP /SP, especially since your CAD is just centered anyway.
Sure, you can do that. Yeah, that's fine. As long as you're not bringing it in like miles away from the middle of your model. Yeah, you can. I've done that. You're going to get the same result essentially. It's the procedure. So that's perfectly fine.
Excellent, excellent. All right, it looks like our time is up. So thank you everyone for joining. Eric, thank you so much for being here with us and having a project ready to go to show everyone. We
No
really
problem.
look forward to seeing what you come up with on the course as you update it.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We hope to see you back here next month. And if you are interested in participating in the Building Engineering Community Meetup, that is starting on Thursday. So maybe we'll see you there. Everyone have a great day, and we'll talk next time.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.